Addictions touch even the best Christian families right here in San Diego. This is Recovery Radio San Diego with Todd Cunningham of Pacific Hills Treatment Center and Recovery Options Network, along with John and Leslie Savage on KPRZ weekdays at 6:30. Stay with us for real-life stories, help from Christian experts, what works and what doesn't work, and local area resources for you and your family. Welcome to Recovery Radio San Diego.
Good evening. You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is a brand new radio ministry about addictions and self-destructive behaviors and the gift of recovery. Welcome to Recovery Radio. My name is John Savage, and I am a grateful recovering addict. I'm one of 3 members of this new local radio ministry. Recovery Radio is heard daily at this time, Monday through Friday, and its sole mission is to assist addicts and their families by providing local professional resources to get them the help they need to live a healthy and productive life. In studio with me is my wife, Leslie, and also Todd Cunningham from Recovery Options. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Very good. It's a Thursday. I'm glad to be here tonight. Let's talk about Recovery Options. I want you to give the telephone number out, and if you want to talk a little bit about the type of feedback that you're getting from people calling, that would be great, Todd.
Okay. Well, Recovery Options is a group of people that are making themselves available 24 hours a day. Well, actually, not 24 hours a day. A good portion of the day. You call in if you have somebody that's got an addiction problem or you have an addiction problem, and they're there to talk to you and help you identify this, how serious the situation is, and what we can do to get you help, whether it's just something you do on your own or whether it's to where we actually got to get you into a treatment center, get you detoxed, and really get you on the right track. What you do is you call 949-973-9140, and somebody's there to take your call and answer your questions. Actually, you'll get to talk to me
that's good.
For the next couple of weeks. So.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So you can call Todd really anytime, and you can call him immediately following this program this evening at 949-973-9140. When we were doing the research for this radio program, first and foremost, we know that you just don't tune into radio and hear people talking about addictions and recovery. So that was one of the purposes of the show. Secondly, I believe that there's an issue within the churches. The church community sees addiction problems most likely every day in their churches. But when we were doing our research, we found that there were a lot of churches that just were not capable enough to handle the addiction questions and what to do. And so that was another part of this radio ministry of Recovery Radio. We have worked out a very special program with Recovery Options and Pacific Hill Treatment Centers. And I would like for you, Todd, to talk about our scholarship opportunities.
Well, Pacific Hills has come to the table with a matching dollar-for-dollar scholarship program for the churches. I used to, when I was in Seattle, I used to work with a church that had probably the first state-approved outpatient treatment program, and it started out as a ministry for them. And what had happened is they started getting so many people that the volunteer staff couldn't handle it. Then they started getting people coming in that were methamphetamine addicts. Then you had, and they just start showing up, and it was just way too much for the church to handle. And so they ran into some troubles, and they had to shut down. And, at that stage, it became my mission to basically empower churches to deal with substance abuse. More often than not, I'd find churches that just weren't equipped to deal with the hardcore alcoholism, drug addiction, etc. When somebody comes in and they're on meth, they were using 4 hours ago, nobody really knows what to do with this person. Or they're going through their detox process, white knuckling it, and they come in and they're just a mess. They're looking for help. The church just isn't equipped to deal with that. So, one of the things that we're offering is through Pacific Hills for some scholarships for the churches, that if they have somebody in the congregation that is having problems, that we can assist them in getting them into some treatment. And so what I encourage is both businesses and churches can give me a call at 949-973-9140. Richard Perlin, who's our guest here today, is specializes in detox. He is as well offering up some scholarship programs. So please give us a call, and let's not let these things go off to the wayside. Let's use them.
That is very good. And Richard, thank you. That was very generous of you to offer that. It all comes to the first step. And this week we've been talking about the detox process. For me, my first step was that surrender and admitting to myself that I was powerless over my addiction and that my life was unmanageable. And all of us here at Recovery Radio are praying for all of you who are out there struggling with an addiction or an abuse problem. But sometimes when we come to that first step, we need professional help. And that's why this week Richard's been nice enough to come down, talk to us about the detox process of that first step of getting off and then migrating into a recovery program. So with that, thank you very much for coming down, Richard. And Todd, I know that you kind of had an idea where we're going with the program this afternoon.
Well, we've in the past few days we've talked about generally what detox is. We've talked about prescriptions and the abuse with prescriptions, and the detox of prescription drugs. We've talked about opiates and what opiates are, and how to the medications that are used in detoxing off of the opiates. What I'd like to do is today talk about alcoholism. It's my understanding that alcoholism and detoxing off of alcoholism can be one of the most physical challenging detoxes out there. It affects our heart rate, it affects our respiration, and so on. But we've all heard stories of how bad it is. My father, I can remember when I was younger that my mother used to take my father, and when he'd come back drunk, she would tie him to the bed. And this was years and years ago, around 1965, where there really weren't any treatment centers, and this was in a small little cabin up by Mammoth, and he would detox up there. He'd hallucinate and go through incredible things. I want to focus on that today. Can you kind of explain what you're doing, Richard, as far as your program and how it relates to detox, and then kind of roll that into alcoholism?
Right, and first off, I just want to say it's been a great week here, and thanks for having me back. And at First House, we are we have separate men's and women's facilities, and of course we are a state licensed facility. We work hand in hand with two addictions trained doctors. They actually come to our facilities, see the patients, and according to their medical needs, provide a detox protocol. We're staffed 24 hours to ensure that our patients have a level of support throughout the day and through the night. I do want to mention that you mentioned that alcohol is a very it presents a lot of challenges for detox. I've been in the game for a little while, and of course, you watch my problem in relation to drugs and alcohol was primarily heroin, and I have a 12-step sponsor that told me coming off of heroin was nothing compared to extended alcohol abuse in terms of the detox. And of course, many of the symptoms, Todd, that you shared with me about your father are familiar to me in an unmedically supported detox. And so alcohol addiction specifically is a very dangerous deal. Our doctors actually have a higher level of concern for alcohol detox than virtually any other drug or detox that we see. And there's several different reasons for that. Alcohol being socially acceptable on many levels, and maybe abuse has taken place over a much longer period of time. The body actually does become physically dependent on it, and of course, when you stop the parade in that regard, it is a very difficult transition. The doctor will, in order to kind of offset those symptoms that you spoke of, doctors will routinely and most commonly prescribe either Librium or Valium to kind of take some of that edge off. Certainly blood pressure is a component of alcoholism that has to be watched and monitored closely. And so it's a difficult time. Of course, in terms of with medical support, though, it's a very achievable goal. To break that initial dependence. It occurs generally over a 3 to 5 day period. Kind of the first link in the chain under the heading there. And of course, it is, we've been talking all week about the necessity of following up detox with a level of care that extends, far into the future. And, anybody that's been around recovery for any period of time has heard the old axiom, one day at a time. And boy, oh boy, it really comes into play in terms of people that undergo the detox process. And at First House, of course, in conjunction with what you folks do over Pacific Hills, what we're interested in is not only breaking the physical and psychological dependence on alcohol, but kind of transitioning a person to receive the gift of recovery by in its most basic text, doing things differently after detox. And so there we go.
Great. Thank you.
You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio for San Diego. Our guest this week has been Richard Perlin, who is from First House Detox up in the Orange County area. We thank you for coming down. If you've got a question about today's program, or if you want to talk to somebody about recovery, you can call Todd at 949-973-9140. That's 949-973-9140.
So, Richard, what I think I hear you saying is that there's more to stopping drinking than just removing the alcohol.
Yeah, thank you, Les. I think that's the perfect way to phrase it. The detox process, although it certainly denotes abstinence from alcohol, the obsession that accompanies alcoholism is almost unbearable without proper treatment. And of course, families out there have seen this again and again and again, where they'll go through the financial expense and the emotional investment in watching a loved one break the physical addiction to alcohol, only to have them return home with a promise that they would never do it again. And of course, the cycle begins again. It might last. The intervals might be a week. It might be 2 weeks. It might be 2 months. But in the absence of a completely different approach to life and circumstance, it is inevitable that the alcoholic will drink again. They have, in my opinion, no choice but to drink again, in the absence of, really doing things differently.
Richard, alcoholism or drinking is socially so accepted, and there's so many families out there that are entertaining. It's just a part of people's life. It's some people are able to drink on a regular basis and so on. I've had people come to me and say, how do I know if my husband's an alcoholic? And I basically say, do you have a problem with him drinking? Is he causing problems for you? Well, yes. Have you asked him to stop? Well, yes. Has he stopped? Well, no. He says it's what he prefers to do. Well, that's a problem. And so I've always kind of considered that to be where he's placing that drink or that thing that he's doing on a pedestal above the people around him that he loves and that loves him. And that's kind of the first sign that there's a problem going on in the family with any type of substance. How does somebody know that there's an alcoholism problem?
Well, it's a great question, Todd. And of course, there are so many variables in recovery there too. And one of the real aspects of where that I use to identify alcoholism is kind of the fervor with which an alcoholic will preserve their right to drink. And by that I mean an alcoholic will, if when your loved one, generally if people have a problem with a substance and you confront them on it on any level, it might be as innocuous as a question as, honey, don't you think you're drinking too much? Or, you made a jerk of yourself at the party last night, drinking again. if a human being really is vested in the drinking process, they're going to become, it's the old joke, the best defense is a good offense. And so they might go into that attack phase, mind your own business. I have to drink. I work so hard. Nobody understands my drinking. And it kind of, they take that offensive stance. People that don't have a problem would be much more likely to say, geez Louise, I really need to take a look at what I'm doing here. I am drinking too much. And so alcoholism, when it kind of sinks its hooks into a human being, can, in my opinion, can be most easily identified by an individual's reluctance to speak about it, or to become, offended that you would even suggest that they monitor their drinking a little bit better. And a lot of it is just kind of gut instinct. I think that by the time people think that someone they love might have a drinking problem, I think most assuredly they do.
You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. This is Recovery Radio for San Diego. And with us this week is Richard Perlin from First House Detox. Detox is the first step in getting help, and we're talking about the different elements of the detox process.
Well, I think anybody that has a loved one that's tried to get them to stop drinking knows that just doesn't work. But why is it so hard for someone to actually make that decision?
Well, I from my perspective, and relying on my personal experience, and of course my interaction with literally thousands and thousands of alcoholics to this point, I think that as an alcoholic, we are always the last one to see the consequences of our drinking or our drug abuse. And I think that that's a component of alcoholism that is kind of put in place by the disease itself to ensure that we're not going to really take a real look at it. I think that that alcoholism protects itself in that manner, and by that I mean that if I don't look at a problem that I have, and my addiction precludes me from looking at the problem, well, I'm not likely to do anything about it. And the disease is very stubborn in terms of its commitment to protect itself in that regard. And so, kind of the common theme of this week here is to get people to kind of stop what they're doing in their own personal life, or to look at the lives of their loved ones and take a minute and pick up the phone and start consulting with people that can give them some accurate perspective. I think as families, or even alcoholics or drug addicts, we feel like that we're all alone out there, that we're unique, and that nobody's going to understand. And of course, as a man in recovery, I've found exactly the opposite. I have in terms of my commitment to my own personal recovery, I have found these magnificent resources out there, people that will stop what they're doing day or night to talk to me about what's going on with me, and to offer me maybe just a little different way to look at things. And I think that's just literally the first step here, is to kind of say, hey, look, I've identified this issue in my life, and I want to get some information about it.
Because I think one of the other mysteries of addiction is, why can't the addict see what we see?
It just gets back to, if I see as an addict what you see, then I would have to stop. And boy, the addiction just says, look, go in any direction, but don't look at the real problem. And of course, this is what families are subjected to, kind of this shell game where an addict will, for example, will say, look, I drink too much because you're always on my back about drinking. Or I use drugs because you make my life intolerable. And once again, the best defense being the great offense. And the disease protects itself in that regard. And I know everybody out there that's listening to this really relates to that, because it is identical in one family to the next.
You're listening to 1210 AM KPRZ. If you just tuned in, you're hearing us talk about recovery and addictions, and that's what this program is about. If you've got questions about addiction, or if you're struggling with an addiction, you can call Todd Cunningham, who is one of our hosts on this program. His telephone number is area code 949-973-9140.
Last week we spoke a lot about codependency and family, the family dynamics, and we really kind of drilled it home that alcoholism is not just the alcoholic's or the addict's problem. It's actually a disease that affects the entire family. So, and we've just been talking about is how does somebody quit? Wait, how does an alcoholic just quit? Why can't he just quit on his own? Why doesn't he see what we see? Why doesn't he feel what we feel? And as codependents, we end up, picking up and taking care of this alcoholic. We pay his bills, we make excuses for him, we do all these things. Can you kind of talk to me? I know that you work in the intervention field and you work with coaching families. Let's kind of turn that around a little bit, and let's bring reality to the listeners out here who have somebody in their family and they can identify themselves as being codependent, because bottom line is they haven't picked up the phone and called anybody yet, and they're just allowing it to go on. They're dealing with it. They hate it. They're being codependent.
Well, it's just, of course, this is really where my passion is, because I've found that the greatest effectiveness that I can have as a man in recovery in terms of reaching out to the addict is to not talk to the addict themselves. And I think many people out there might be surprised to know that I always just tell families, look, it's not about what the addict or the alcoholic's going to do. It's about what you're going to do, and of course, what you're no longer going to do. And this is why it is absolutely essential for families, particularly families that have just been battered into submission by addiction, people that have families that have accepted addiction as part of someone of their loved one's life. And of course, that's a family that just does not see the way out. And once again, what we're, as a family, what we're telling an addict is, look, seek help. You can do this. There's a way out. And of course, all the while, we're discarding the opportunity to seek help for ourselves. And so it becomes do as we say, not as we do. I often tell families, how can you possibly ask an addict or alcoholic to seek help if you're unwilling to seek help? The message is lost on an addict in that format. What we have to do first is take a stance as a family and say, listen, our lives are God-given and every bit as important as yours. There's oftentimes 6, 8, 10 more people affected by one alcoholic, and we routinely sacrifice our other important relationships trying again and again to help this particular individual. We've got to stop that. We've got to get some proper perspective as a family and say, look, we love you. We will always love you. But don't confuse us with people that are willing to throw away our life and circumstance in a lost cause with you. You need to get help. We have found help for you. Now make the decision. And of course, that's exactly what the intervention process consists of, is bringing the family together, getting them all on the same page and saying, look, you know what? We've made the phone calls. We are satisfied that good information is out there. We know that you will have the opportunity to change your life, and that's not based on a book we read. That's based on conversations that we've had with people that have actually changed their lives, that have been right where you are today. And so that information is out there, and I just implore people to avail themselves to it.
I can't emphasize enough how it affects everybody in the family. Last week, Norm Boshoff used the term, you can't fix the addict, but you can fix yourself. And I had a telephone call. One of the callers that called in just the other night, she had a husband that was abusing, and he really didn't want to quit. And she didn't know what to do. She didn't know why she was there. And I was like, well, what you can do is you can fix what you have. You're the mother of the family. You're the mother of your children. You're the mother bear. Your job is to take care of those kids. And so you need to start protecting them and protecting yourself. You have every right to wake up in the morning, not being fearful of the next day, not fearing Friday, not fearing Sunday, and so on. You do have control over yourself. Get yourself into some Al-Anon meetings, or find somebody that can support you. Take that step to help yourself. And you can do that by calling Ronnie, Recovery Options.
Absolutely. Thank you, Todd, for that. And they can call you immediately following the show. Your telephone number to speak with family members, or if you're struggling and you want to know what you need to do right now you're ready to take that first step, you want to talk about detox options, call Todd at area code 949-973-9140. That's area code 949-973-9140. You know, this week you've been very gracious with your time, Richard, and we really appreciate the time that you've taken to talk about detox. Will you come back one more day?
I'd be glad to. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. I really appreciate it. That's Richard Perlin with First House Detox. This is 1210 a.m. KPRZ. You're listening to Recovery Radio, a brand new radio program here in San Diego that talks about addictions, but also the gift of recovery. We have scholarship programs available to churches and local businesses. If you want to hear more about our scholarship programs for not only the Pacific Hills Treatment Center, but also Richard's First House Detox Center, you can, again, call Todd at area code 949-973-9140. Ran out of time again today, but we'll pick it up again tomorrow. Richard, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Todd, thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow. This is 1210 a.m. KPRZ.
Addictions touch even the best Christian families right here in San Diego. This is Recovery Radio San Diego with Todd Cunningham of Pacific Hills Treatment Center and Recovery Options Network, along with John and Leslie Savage on KPRZ weekdays at 6:30. Stay with us for real-life stories, help from Christian experts, what works and what doesn't work, and local area resources for you and your family. Welcome to Recovery Radio San Diego.